Oh, but on a little bit more positive topic, another big change that I don't think is really either positive nor negative, it's just a change, is talent points for commanders. So previously you could just max out your commander if you had enough commander XP. Now it's all about talents. So you gain talents for each commander level, which is still dependent on your commander XP. And you still can only use abilities, rather the talents of up to the tier your unit is. So you can only use up to tier 6 talents if your unit is tier 6, for example. So the issue I can see with this is I'm afraid of min-maxing. And again, same issue I had before with the XP thingy, that people just find, the most efficient way, the most efficient stats to invest in, and that will be the one build to roll them all. And it will be clearly dependent on how the math underneath the engine works, rather than, what you feel like and what you want to achieve. So I don't know, I want to kill enemies faster, so I'm gonna bring more melee attack. I want to survive for longer, so I'll bring more melee defense. But in the end, it can turn out that due to how math works and how the hit and miss chance and damage and whatever works, it will turn out that melee attack is vastly superior to melee defense. And then anyone who is unaware of that will take melee defense and will essentially screw himself over, which is not nice. So I think to combat that, we could have very distinctive upgrades to those abilities. Something like we have in World of Warships, where we have a captain and every captain has access to a set of skills in 4 different categories, and each skill is very distinct from one another. I mean, some of them are a little bit similar, but most of them are pretty distinctive. And then, okay, I am in this ship, I want to do this thing with this ship, so obviously I will take this and this skill. And that's pretty much the end of discussion. And you don't really dive deep into the math underneath the game, apart from one ability, which is IFHE. And it's like, okay, do I penetrate this armor? Do I not penetrate this armor? That's a little bit of bullshit, but it's not much. It's just one ability and how it interacts with armor penetration, and that's it. So everyone can do that, and it's not like this math is hard. You just divide a number by 6 and there we go. So yeah, either that's
Numbers are hard.
Screw numbers. Either that, or have clear builds for each class and have enough points to max out every needed aspect of that build. So let's say I'm playing Caesar. I'm playing ranged units with Caesar, javelins. So there's a clearly the best build for javelins. So if you're playing javelins, you play that. If you decide you play cavalry with Caesar, artillery with Caesar, you go for the distinctive Caesar cavalry or Caesar artillery build, and so on. So I hope we can have that. That also introduces, the ability to have some fun with additional abilities. We've seen something like that in the tech tree, talent tree, ability tree, whatever. And if, for example, you sacrifice 5 area of effect range, but you gain 11 melee attack bonus. So it's a trade-off, right? And you have to spend 2 talent points of that. And if you only spend 1 on -5, then, well, you fucked up. I've seen also in Kenane's case, all the way up at tier 10, you have double number of projectiles, which is preceded by like minus X% of reload time. And that again, where math comes in, because we still remember the laser barrage at tier 10 with Caesar plus Kenane, right? And there was a huge difference between a regular barrage and a Caesar laser barrage, where Caesar only provided 5% reload speed with his VD, and that made all the difference. So here again, it will come down to a complicated math. Okay, is the double number of projectiles actually worth it? Is it actually worth it on this on all arches or not? All right, or if I play Cretan arches with this bow, do I go for double amount of projectiles? But if this bow, I go with, well, I just stay away from it and invest my 2 points somewhere else. So yeah, someone will just have to do the math, and that math isn't really available to us. Like in case of Water Warships, where the penetration mechanics are pretty clear, at least in terms of HE. So yeah, that's questionable, at least for me. But one good thing that we can definitely take away from this is that it will give us more interesting things to talk about when we record our guides. That will definitely be coming this time around, soon TM, wink wink. So, well, with that teaser out of the way, does anyone have any additional thoughts that would expand on what has been already said about the biggest changes in the game? George?
Yeah, I'd just like to go back to what you said when you were finishing up what I was saying about victory conditions. And I thought you brought up a really good point about people are willing to sacrifice themselves now for objectives. And that obviously links in it as well with the replenishing and respawning mechanics of the fact that now people are willing to send in a unit, even if it's simply to slow down the enemy, because they know that even if that unit is completely destroyed, they can respawn it, and it served its purpose, even though they don't look really cool on the end screen with loads of kills where they've mopped up some archers that weren't paying attention or something. That they have actually contributed in a different way that previously in the game, if you sacrifice your unit, then that's not coming back. And you've just now put your team a big disadvantage because you've lost that unit, and that's like 100 men if it's an infantry unit that your team is now on the back foot.
Well, you use the term sacrifice, and I think you treated it unfairly because sacrifice in the new game mode was good, but sacrifice in the old game mode was bad. And I disagree with that because sacrifices are usually good. It's not like seppuku, right? It's not suicide, it's sacrifice, which is different. So if you suicide your unit, you lose it and gain nothing. But if you sacrifice it, that means you gain something. And I think it didn't change because the idea of sacrificing your unit to delay an enemy, or I don't know, you can sacrifice 1 cavalry to kill 3 units of archers, right? You know your unit of cavalry will die, but you will kill 3 units of archers. Totally worth it, right? And that concept of sacrifice is still very much the same in this new game mode, but you can use, you can have a different types of sacrifice for like a capture point, right? Which just didn't exist before. But the interesting point you brought up is just behind the psychology of the players, because previously they would think, oh, sacrificing is actually not a sacrifice, it's a suicide, right? But it is not. It was still as good as it was, or it still is as good as it was, but now people will be more willing to do that because, well, they will have opportunity to respawn. Maybe they didn't want to throw away their fun and maybe wanted to play in the battle a little bit longer. Well, now everyone plays until the end, so at least that's out of the way, and it's an interesting look into, players' psychology and how that affects their choices, even though, the choices are effectively still the same. Just the infrastructure is a little bit different. Anyway, Axel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, going off of that, I think the new game mode, everything that comes off of that, it allows newer players to get into the game easier. It is easier to understand what you're supposed to do. Go capture the points, go capture the next point, go defend your own points. It's much easier than there's 2 bases and now everybody's going to try and kill each other. But you shouldn't go for the bases immediately. You should try and fight people. So I think the new game mode will be easier to bring people into the game. But I think, and it's not perfect, we've talked about that enough here, but I think it's a good step in the right direction to bring the masses in.
I definitely agree with that. Yes, it's easier to understand, the purpose for a random player, because yeah, as you mentioned previously, it was 2 bases, 2 armies, and a huge gap in between the final objective, either killing everyone or capping the base. But how do get around to doing that, right? Maybe for most of the players that was the issue. They just had no idea on how to get to it, and they just went forward and then started doing things like Joker in Batman, which may not necessarily be the best of ideas. Gunslinger, do you have anything to add?
No, not really.
Okay, that was easy. Rainfire?
I'm gonna have to talk about balance anyway. So.
Mm-hmm.
There was one other thing I wanted to touch on, just as far as the Chinese release and having everything at least in game in China. Like we have come up with a couple as a community, come up with a couple workarounds for some of these things, and people have been pretty much translating and laying out step-by-step instructions on how to do all this stuff in Chinese, translating everything to English, like on Discord and social media. So, I mean, there is that. And I think along those lines, it may actually bring the community outside of China closer together, as we're communicating and trying to figure out ways to, enjoy playing a game that we love, and I'm kind of with you. I'm prepared to put up with a fair amount of bullshit if I can play Arena, even with all the changes they've made, the core mechanics are still there, and I'm happy to be able to play again, bottom line.
Yeah, it definitely brings people together. I think that's pretty great. I've myself been doing video guides since that's the way I can contribute. As previously as a clan leader and a content creator, I was organizing tournaments. Well, we can still have a tournament, but definitely not a serious one with this amount of ping and random disconnects and where victory will mostly be decided by a random lag rather than actual skill. So that's out of the question. But yeah, there's also a lot fewer of us left from the West playing the game because a lot of people are just, I've been betrayed once between Steam and Wargaming. Now I've been betrayed second time between Wargaming and China. It's like I'm not getting into it third time. Maybe when it comes back to the West, I'll give it another shot, see if I still love the game. But for now, a lot of people are just done with that bullshit. And that's fair enough. It's hard to blame them for that, especially since, CA has earned it for their wrong decisions in the past. So now they're suffering the consequences for it. But, the people who still play and love the game and people who would like to see it back in the West, we should just continue to supporting them as we always have been, or at least should have been doing, to make it right this time around. And there's a lot of people in community who help CA to understand what to do. The problem is that CA often either doesn't listen or listens to the wrong guys. So yeah, there's that. They also need to be aware that for every good feedback out there, there's also some bullshit feedback. And they need to recognize which is which.
One thing I'd like to say about the new game mode actually is I think it's really good that it'll probably appeal to a wider audience, and I think that's what'll really be good for the game, because if it appeals to a wide audience in China, then that success is going to translate over to pretty much anywhere else it wants to, with the amount of money available and resources that companies would actually be willing to put into it. So
yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, well, let's leave the discussion for later. We'll definitely have time slots available for that, so don't worry.